Hello and welcome to the first episode of A Picture and 1,000 Words. My name is Michael Fiedler, and I'm going to be your host on what is intended to be a synergistic experience. A little bit about me: I am a former medical communications professional who spent a lot of time illustrating medical information, and I'm a bit of a nerd slash junkie in terms of this capacity. So, what I'm trying to do here is present a truth as I see it, with a very, what I like to think of as an engaging and impactful way. And then not only explain what the message is intended to convey, but also how I did it and what features I took advantage of. And I should say that I did all of this in PowerPoint. It's where I did most of my professional work, and just about anybody can do this if they use PowerPoint themselves. So this first episode is called Look Beneath the Surface, and what you're seeing here is an iceberg metaphor, which is pretty common these days. It comes up in a lot of different contexts, and I'm sure we all are familiar with this, but just to reinforce it, the idea is that 90% of an iceberg's mass lies below the waterline, which means that we're only seeing 10% of reality. And taking this to the iceberg metaphor, the idea here is that aspects of culture that are explicit, visible, and taught are just really what's above the waterline. That's just 10% of reality. And below the waterline is where you get our hidden culture, which are our habits, assumptions, understandings, values, judgments. And that actually plays a really huge part in our culture, who we are, why we do certain things, and that's really the overall message. So in terms of how I created this, starting top to bottom with that look beneath the surface copy, that's color matched to some of that whiteness that you're seeing on the iceberg. And color matching is a really fantastic feature in PowerPoint, and there's a lot of color matching on this slide. Most of these circles or texts are pulled as a color match on some portion of the iceberg image, and that way it allows everything to sort of seem it's like it's interconnected, and color matching is a really powerful feature that I use quite a bit. Going beneath the surface, if you look at that 90% figure, that's actually not an Excel figure, but rather just an object that I pulled on PowerPoint, and I adjusted it so that it looks like a 90% segment. It also has an inward shadow, which gives it that incorporation feeling into the iceberg, which I really like. That same feature is used on the text box to the right. What's interesting is it looks like that text box is behind the iceberg, and the way that you do that is I took multiple copies of this iceberg image, and then I took one of those copies and removed the background, which will give you a segment of the iceberg. And if you overlay those segments on top of each other, you can get a layering like this, which allows you to have things that are either in front or behind something else. Going a little bit further, what you see in that is in that above the waterline, below the waterline copy is an actually 2x2 table. The reason why I use a table is it allows you to format all of that text without having 4 floating text boxes. So it might not look like a table, but that's actually the way that that copy is organized, which can be helpful in terms of formatting. Going all the way to the bottom of the slide, the only thing that I wanted to point out here is that I accessed a lot of these references on July 4th, 2018, which was an auspicious date. My wife and I and our son were on vacation at my mother and my in-laws' cabin in Canada. It was really a magical week in Canada where a lot of brain activity was happening on my part, and a lot of things came out of that experience, and they may come up again and again, but it was quite an impactful period of time. So that's how the slide was made, generally speaking. And now I want to go into some of the deeper messages. So the prevailing message here is that what we're perceiving is really a small sliver of what's reality, and that our perception, vis-a-vis our visual perception, omits 90% of the truth. And that means that what we see in terms of the people we see, the things that we see, are much more nuanced than they may appear, for better or worse. And, thinking about things like the use of social media, what you're seeing on social media is just what's on the surface. And there's likely, or in fact, objectively speaking, there is so much more beneath the surface. And there could be good things, there could be bad things, but the point here is just that there is the vast majority of what is reality is actually beneath the surface, and we can't actually perceive it easily. And why that's critical is that should give us a sense of empathy, meaning that if somebody does something that we don't like, or maybe does something that we do like, we should remember that what we're seeing is really only a superficial representation of reality. And in all seriousness, so much of what's driving a person's behavior we have no concept of. We're more than welcome to ask and inquire to find out and get into those habits and assumptions, understandings, values, and judgments. But judging exclusively based on the surface, we're really missing 90% of what's really going on. And then flipping it to ourselves, remember that what you're projecting really only represents about 10% of your identity. The shoes you wear, the car you drive, the things you eat, that's just what's on the surface. And in reality, a vast majority of your identity is actually the person that made those choices, because you are the aggregate of your choices. And that's actually what lies below the waterline: your habits, assumptions, understandings, values, and judgments. And remembering and prioritizing those things, because what's on the surface is just a small smattering of reality. So the overall message that I'd like you to take away from this is to be open-minded. As you're walking down the street and you're seeing somebody, realize that you're just seeing 10% of what's real. And it's an incumbent upon you to save some headspace for the other 90%, and to remember that appearances can be deceiving because they only represent a small sliver of what's reality. And then also remembering that what you're radiating is really only a fraction of who you are. And what's really going on beneath the surface is the choices that you're making. And what I hope I've articulated with this whole episode experience is a sense of perspective on truth. And each one of these episodes is intended to present a truth as I see it, and it will likely be penetrating. Not in a good or a bad way, but just in a very deep and impactful way. And how you interpret it is really up to you. Now, hopefully this serves some sort of entertainment value. That's the general purpose. But I hope it also adds some positivity to your life. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to sharing more with you.